Welcome to the Abundance Code, the podcast where we delve into the secrets of unlocking abundance in mind, money, and meaning. I'm your host, Jason Stanley.
Right? I start my day and I end my day every day with what I'm thankful for. And I don't just say thank you for the good things. I get specific about them. But one of the most basic ways that you can do it is really starting to focus and being honest with yourself about the abundance that you already have. Welcome back to the Abundance Code, where we discuss mind, money, and meaning. Let's dive into it. This time I want to talk to you guys about actual behaviors, things, actions you can do to start to change the way that you think about money, right? Let's call it your money mindset. And we've talked about the words that we use. We talked about how that impacts our thinking. We've talked about how we're programmed from certain things. We've talked about our belief systems and stuff like that in the past. But what I want to focus on this time is how you go about changing your mindset from a poor mindset to a wealth mindset, to more of a wealth-focused mindset, right? Again, this isn't necessarily about becoming rich. This is about how you look at things, how you view money, and how you think about it, how you change your mindset on it. Most people are programmed to have a poor mentality whenever it comes to money, right? They look at things in lack of. They look at people on social media, they compare themselves against those people, or they compare themselves against, people on television, so on and so forth. And then they feel really poor in their own financial situation. And it's easy to do, right? Because there's always going to be somebody that has more than you. There's always going to be something more you could do, or more things that you could have, or you might want something, you might want a bigger house, you might want a nicer car or something like that. But really all of those things are equate out to kind of a poor mindset. And it's very unusual for somebody to have a wealth mindset or a prosperity mindset, right? You have to change the way that you do things in order to change that mindset. We talked about the words that we use, right? We talked about how if you, say, certain things, it affects you in a certain way and you behave in a certain way. Well, the same thing's true with money. But there's actually things that you can do to start changing that. And so you need to rewire how you view and handle money. But it has to start with your mindset about money, right? And so some of the, like we talked about in this last episode, is being honest about things, being honest about what's really possible, and getting away from some of the myths on passive or mailbox money, stuff like that, right? That starts to help us to rewire our psyche, or rewire our mind about how we think and view money, right? But one of the most basic ways that you can do it is really starting to focus and being honest with yourself about the abundance that you already have. Because if you're listening to this, right, chances are you live in abundance. Now, you may not feel like it. It may not feel like abundance to you. And so you have to get down into that feeling and recognize it for what it really is, and recognize where you actually have abundance in your life. Because almost all of us do, right? Even our poor in this country. Warren Buffett tells this story, and I love it. I think it's a perfect example. Our poor live better than J.D. Rockefeller did. Rockefeller was the richest person in the world during his life, right? Arguably, very, very wealthy individual, if not the richest person, right? During his lifetime. But he didn't have heat, he didn't have air conditioning, and he didn't have a television. Think about that. He definitely didn't have a phone that you play on all the time, that you can get information like that from, right? And so a lot of times what happens is we measure ourselves against everybody else. We're constantly comparing ourselves to the world around us, comparing ourselves to standards that we set that aren't even really based in reality sometimes, So maybe you don't have the Gucci clothes or drive, the Porsche or the Lamborghini or something like that. But those things aren't what make you wealthy. Those things aren't what give you a prosperous mindset. Those are the outcomes sometimes of people being good with their money. Oftentimes, more than not, it's people that are trying to project an image rather than actually having the wealth to have those things. In fact, if you look at most newer sports cars, I forget the exact statistic, but Graham, I forget his last name, but Graham, who does a podcast and a YouTube show about money similar to this, right? He was interviewing a car dealer that sold exotic sports cars. And what was interesting is that, the car dealer even said the majority of the people who are buying the new exotic sports cars are not really all that wealthy. They're financing them, they're leasing them, that kind of stuff. And they're stretching to make that work in their life, right? So those are not necessarily the signs of wealth, right? They're the signs of people that often want to look wealthy. So what can you do? How can you start? Very simple, rewiring the way you look at money. Well, number one, you have to unplug, okay? So you have to stop comparing yourself to everybody around you. You got to stop looking at what the Kardashians are wearing or whatever it is, right? You got to stop comparing yourself, all right? They're in a different space in their life than maybe you are, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's somebody in this world that would love to have what you have. And you start by recognizing that. You start by recognizing that I live a life that somebody else wants to be able to live, right? And when you do that, you have to be honest with yourself and recognize where you have abundance. Again, even if it's something as simple as sitting down and writing out, I am thankful for, right? I'm thankful for the air conditioning that I have in my home. I'm thankful for the roof that I have over my head, right? Maybe you don't own a home. Maybe you rent a home. That's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But you have food that you put in your mouth. You have, creature comforts, right? You have air conditioning, you have heat, you have television, you have a phone, you have a computer. You have tons of information at your fingertips. You can learn literally anything. So if you start to adopt a mindset of abundance, right, then you start to see those opportunities to be able to learn things. And as you learn things, you can grow and you can change your behavior, so on and so forth. So how do you do it? Very simple, okay? This is a practice that I use in my life. I do it still to today. I very simply do this. I do it twice a day. Now, I am a person of faith. I believe in God. I have, faith in Christ and that kind of stuff. So I'm not telling you what to believe in, but I'm telling you how I do it, right? I start my day and I end my day every day with what I'm thankful for. And I don't just say thank you for the good things in my life. I get specific about them. Thank you for my health, right? So I've had cancer. I think we've talked about that in one of the episodes, right? I say thank you for the health that I have. Thank you for the healing that took place in my body. Thank you for my children. I name my children, right? Specifically, I say what I'm thankful about them for, right? My youngest, I'm thankful for his personality, his sense of humor, right? His inquisitive nature. My oldest, I'm thankful for his work ethic, for, those kinds of things. How much he works, how hard he works to help people. I start thanking God for what is good in my life, specifically. Now, interestingly enough, I've never made it through everything. I can never make it through everything that I'm thankful for. I either have to leave for work before I finish, or I fall asleep at night before I finish. How amazing is that? And then you say, well, yeah, but your life, you're doing well, you're successful. I haven't always been like that. I've been homeless. I've had cancer, I've had struggles, right? But in all of those areas, I always started with my day, end of my day, with what I'm thankful for. and you name it specifically. And this is the problem that we don't do. This is something that we don't do a lot of in our lives. And when you start to do that, you start to operate from a position of gratitude. You start to see the abundance in your life. And guess what? When you're focused on something like that, you can measure. And when you can measure something, you can grow it. It's very simple. So, it's you start focusing on these things, you start to see the abundance, and then you can measure the abundance in your life. And guess what? It starts to compound, because now you can start to change your behaviors, do little things on a regular basis that start to grow that abundance, right? Rather than living in a lack of, rather than living in a scarcity mindset. Most people want to tell you everything that's wrong with their life, right? You don't believe me? Walk up and say to somebody, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm okay. Oh, I've been really busy, right? Because we made being busy synonymous with being important, right? Oh, my hip hurts. My head hurts. It's been raining a lot. It's been too sunny a lot. Man, it's getting hot out. Those kinds of things. We love to complain. It's just kind of our default nature as humans. We love to complain. But the reality is that we have very little to complain about, especially in this day and age. I mean, you look at all of the technology that's around us all the time, everything that makes our life easier, right? You have instant access to the internet. You've got instant access to pretty much anything you want to know, right? You have a phone. You can communicate with people instantly. You can order stuff. You don't even have to go to the store anymore. You can just order it and it shows up, right? But yet, most everybody addresses their life from a position of scarcity, right? Or a poor mindset. And especially around their money. Around money, people are almost always have a poor mindset. And so how do you change that? Is it just go make more money? No. Making more money will not give you an abundance mindset. Absolutely not. In fact, I know for a fact, I've done this. I was coaching somebody who made over $2 million a year. And yet they had worse of a net worth than somebody I knew that had made about $120,000 a year. What was the difference? It was their mindset. It was how they viewed money. It's what they believed about it, right? In their case, they had a parent or something that had told them negative things about money growing up. And so they believed that they had to get rid of it. But the bottom line is that if you want a prosperous life, if you want abundance in your life, you have to recognize the abundance that's already there. And maybe it's that you don't have hardly anything right now, right? Maybe you live in a little crappy apartment, so you still have a nice place, right? You can make it nice. Jordan Peterson talks about this. He says, take something in your life and make it better. If you live in a crappy one-bedroom apartment or just a crappy little bitty apartment, right? That's not much to consider. Clean it up. Make it look neat. Do that. Keep it like that on a regular basis. And what happens is that magnifies in your life and it goes into other areas of your life. Suddenly you start to clean up other areas of your life and you start to get better about doing things in other areas of your life. There's a YouTube video of an admiral speaking to the Naval Academy class. And he's talking about every day make your bed, right? That's something remedial. I don't do it, right? I'm not going to make my bed every day. But, the process that he's talking about is actually really smart. He's saying, make your bed every day because that gives you an accomplishment. If nothing else happens that day that's good for you, you can go back to that and say, I accomplished something today, right? Now, again, that's not something that I do on a regular basis, right? I have a wonderful spouse that does that, not because I ask her to, not because I expect it just happens, and that kind of stuff. I've never been that diligent about making my bed except for the time I spent in the military where I was forced, right? So, but again, it's about figuring out something that'll work for you, something that'll give you that win, first and foremost. But secondly, starting to recognize what is good in your life. Start with what you're thankful for, right? Maybe it's that you got up today. Maybe it's that you got a good family. Maybe it's that you got a good job. Maybe it's that you've paid your bills. Something that you can be thankful for, right? Focus on that. Start twice a day. Say it out loud. I do it. I still do it. To this day, I start my day every day out loud saying what I'm thankful for. Specifically, I end my day every day with what I'm thankful for. And it's crazy because the list continues to grow and I still can't make it through that list. How amazing is that? That I have so much in my life to be thankful for that I can't even articulate. I can't even spend enough time to go through all the things that I'm thankful for. Now, I have to remind myself of it. It's not like I'm like this all the time. It's not like I, live in la la land and bad things don't ever happen or my mindset doesn't ever go to a negative space, right? It absolutely does. And so when it does, I have to recognize that and pull myself back. It's hard, but you do have to start to create that abundance mindset, especially around your finances, right? How you create a money mindset is through recognizing where you have abundance in your life. Statistically speaking, I think it's if you make around $35,000 a year, that puts you in the top 10% income earners in the entire world, right? So maybe you're below that. That's okay. That doesn't mean anything. You're still making more money than most people do around the world, right? And if you think about it, $35,000 a year actually does not do a whole lot for you in this country, right? But if you recognize that it does make you abundant, it does give you an abundant life, and it means that you're making more than 90% of the rest of the world, that should start to change the way that you view and handle your money, right? Again, stop comparing yourself, right? We have to unplug from social media and stuff to start to do some of this rewiring. You have to make these things a behavior. And what happens is you start to change the way that you look at things. Start to challenge your own thinking and your own teachings, right? That have been taught to you throughout history. Maybe your parents told you money doesn't grow on trees. I guess they're kind of right? It's a combination of paper and cotton, right? So there's some tree in there involved in that process. Maybe your parents taught you that if you make too much money, you're evil, like rich people are bad, right? Well, question that. Maybe question whether or not that's true, right? There's a lot of good examples of people who have made a lot of money that do very amazing things with it. There's a lot of good examples of people who didn't. There's a lot of good examples of people who don't have any money that did horrible things and that don't have any money that did amazing things. Mother Teresa wasn't wealthy by, today's standards, but you absolutely know who she is, and she changed the world, right? And she did it because she had an abundance mindset and she was focused on helping the world around her, right? So it's not always about the money aspect of things to be rich. I would tell you that Mother Teresa was probably one of the richest people that we're ever going to know about, right? She didn't have dollars. That's not what makes you rich, right? Dollars are the outcome of certain behaviors. Dollars don't make you rich or poor. If you don't believe me, go to your friends. Ask 10 friends how much money makes you rich. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to get 10 different answers. Ask 10 friends how little money makes you poor. And you're going to get 10 different answers. And what that should tell you is that money mindsets, poverty and prosperity are really just about what's going on between your two ears. It's your belief systems, right? For me, maybe $20-30 million makes you rich, in my opinion. Maybe for you, $1 million makes you rich, right? Again, it's a mindset. It's based on who we are, where we're at in our lives, what we currently have, so on and so forth, and how we view the world around us. So again, recognize where in your life you have abundance, because you have it somewhere. Maybe it's only in your health. Maybe it's not in your health. Maybe it's in the fact that you can wake up. Maybe it's in the fact that you can eat food. Maybe it's, something completely different, right? But you have abundance in your life, and you have to start recognizing if you want it to grow, right? Whatever you monitor, whatever you focus on, whatever you measure, you can always grow. So there's a young lady that does a YouTube channel, and I think her name's Cody. She's been on a couple different things. She's here in the Austin area, and she's got a great point. She talks about her mentor, and actually I know her mentor. I've traveled with him before. But anyway, she talks about her mentor, and her mentor told her to look at her bank account on a regular basis, to always know how much money she had in the bank account. And he said, because money is a cruel mistress. If you don't pay attention to her, she'll leave you. And that's true, right? It's not necessarily just about looking at your bank account that makes it grow, right? It's being able to measure it and then take action on that, right? So knowing how much money you have, looking at your bank account, knowing exactly how much money you have, most people don't know. And she made a great point on that. Most people don't know what they have in their bank account. I think I've got this, right? They don't really want to pay attention to it. But if you're paying attention to it, you can measure it. If you can measure it, then you can take action to grow it, right? And that's very simple to do. But it has to start with the wiring between your two ears. Because if you have a negative or a poor mindset when it comes to your money, you can look at your money in the bank and it's just going to make you depressed. And you're going to talk about all the reasons why it's not going to grow, right? All the things that are taking your money away. Oh, I got so much debt. I'm never going to get out of debt. I'm never going to have this. I'm never going to do that, right? And guess what happens? You immediately shut down every opportunity that you have to grow that number, right? You shut it down. Start by being thankful for stuff. Start by what you're thankful for. And start recognizing the abundance in your life. Then when you look at it, you go, wow, that's a good number. How do I make it grow? Rather than I can't do this, and that kind of stuff. Most people want to tell you why they can't do something, right? Whatever it is in life. Most people want to tell you why it won't work, why they can't do it. And that's because they have a scarcity mindset. They have a poor mindset, right? When you have an abundance mindset and you focus on the things that you're thankful for, and when you start to focus on what you're thankful for, and you start to recognize them as a positive or as abundant in your life, you can measure it. Now you can go, hey, how could I make that happen? How could I grow that? You start to use expanding language, right? And so that's the other side of it. It's not just about being thankful for things. It's about changing how you say things. We talked about this before. But as soon as you say, I can't do something, that's not possible, you start using negative language around your money, guess what? You shut down all the opportunities to grow it. I don't care if you start investing it or whatever. If you have negative viewpoint on it, number one, you won't stick with the investment long enough to see the value. You'll sell at the wrong time. You'll lose money in some form or fashion. You'll pick the wrong investment, right? Whatever it is, you will actually sabotage it, because you cannot have two diametrically opposed ideas that coexist in your mind. Otherwise, you'd go crazy. So you cannot be financially successful and think that you're poor, right? You're either going to be poor or you're going to be financially successful. You can't be both, right? You cannot have those two competing thoughts in your mind at one time. You can't have those two competing belief systems. So you have to start to adopt new belief systems. And the easiest one to do is to start with what you're thankful for. And then start changing your language. Use open language, right? Asking questions of how I become this. How do I do that? How can I learn this, right? And then you cast a wide net, right? So by casting a wide net, learn everything you can know. Invest in yourself, right? Invest in growing your knowledge. Invest in growing yourself, making yourself a better person, whether it's you're making yourself healthier, you're learning something, you're going somewhere that can train you on certain behaviors, right? You learn a new trade, you learn a new craft. Cast a wide net. The wider that net is, the more likely you're going to have success from it. But it starts with your mindset. And most people have that poor mindset. And so one of the easiest ways to overcome that, one of the easiest actions that you can take is try it. Try it for a week. See if things don't feel better, right? Start your day, end your day with what you're thankful for, right? Again, I do it in prayer. You do it however you want to do it. But I always want to say thank you for, right? So however you want to do it, I would say thank you for, and then start listing everything specifically in your life that you can be thankful for, right? It takes a shift of mindset. If you can't think of something, you've really got some work to do, because I promise you have something to be thankful for, right? Maybe it's a memory, a good time you had. Thank you for that time period, right? And then that's going to lead you into something else, because once you start thinking about what you can be thankful for, you can't stop. And then once you start doing that, you start positioning your mindset to see the world around you and see your life as being abundant. It's very simple, and it's nothing that's very difficult. Again, it's not a get rich fast plan. It's not, this big crazy secret. It's about just changing the behavior. And it's very different than what society teaches you. It's very different than what you've been taught, right? So it's going to feel a little awkward at first, because we're always taught about what's wrong with our lives. Turn on the news. You're going to hear everything wrong with the world, right? You turn on social media, you see everybody living a life that you don't necessarily live, right? You see these people flying around on private jets and being on yachts and stuff like that. They call them influencers, right? You go, well, I'm not like that. Why are they like that? Right? And then we start to become envious, and then we become jealous. And when we become jealous, we become jaded. And when we become jaded, we start to become poor in our mindsets. So get rid of that stuff out of your life. Stop doing it. Start applying very simple things. Do it on a regular basis, and it will compound, and it'll be able to grow. You'll be able to grow. And specifically with what we're talking about in this thing, start it now, you'll be able to grow your wealth. It's very easy. Nothing crazy, very simple stuff, but hopefully you'll take that, you'll try it, and hopefully you'll see the returns of it in your life. It doesn't mean bad things won't happen. Doesn't mean that you're not going to have time periods that, are just rough. I still do. But when I'm in those time periods, that's when I really dive hard into trying to find things that I can be grateful for in my life. Facing the world with gratitude, right? And then from there, I can usually change the situation that I'm in. All right? So, as I've always said, buck the status quo in order to grow. But go do some research. Research a couple other ideas and stuff on how you can change your mindset. But start with what you're thankful for. You can't go wrong with it. So I look forward to talking to you guys next time. Talk to you soon. Take care.